So the best thing I watched this week is Novocaine, which is currently in cinemas. It's a 2025 action comedy film about a guy who cannot feel any pain due to a medical condition. So he works in a bank, he's kind of managing this condition, and he's already lived way past his life expectancy because he's built his entire life around managing this condition and making sure he doesn't accidentally kill himself because he cannot feel any pain. And then he meets this woman at work and they really hit it off. He's kind of resigned himself to kind of not really living life, right? Because he cannot take any risks. He basically has to live in a very carefully constructed world, right? And then he meets this woman who kind of encourages him to step a little bit outside of his boundaries. And then there's a bank robbery on Christmas Eve. He's the assistant manager, so he is forced to give the bank robbers the combination to the vault, and they take his girlfriend as a hostage. And he basically goes after them because the police are not going to get there quickly enough. And it basically turns into this chase movie where he's trying to track her down and trying to find a way to free her. His big asset is that he cannot feel pain, and so no matter how much punishment he takes and how many fights he gets into, because he doesn't feel any pain, there's no real stopping him, and kind of the plot kind of progresses from there. So like when I first saw the trailer for this, I said, okay, fine. Like, this is an original story. It seems like a good time. It seems like well crafted action. And the movie gave me all of that. So that's nice. But it also, like, the character is really likable. And the story actually goes a little bit further than what you see from the trailers in terms of like the characters and their interactions and this emotional journey that this main character goes on. It's not perfect. It's got some like the ending specifically has some issues, but it's just a good ride. It's an original story. It's a small scale. It makes good use of its premise, which is this guy can't feel any pain, so he gets into one situation after the next that makes good use of that. So it pretty much does everything right. Like so far, it's kind of this year's The Fall Guy, which is also kind of about like an action anti-hero who brings a very specific skill set to the action sequences. And it's not generic, but it is well crafted action that is just a good time. So I really recommend that.
So I watched Paradise, which is a TV show on Hulu. It's essentially about this underground city, or so no, the government have had to create an underground city because there's been an extinction level event that's happened on the surface. So in planning for it, they created this underground city. In here, the president is assassinated or is pretty much murdered in the first episode. So it's following the people and trying to figure out who murdered the president. There's a lot of like mistrust, and it essentially follows his main personal bodyguard in trying to uncover the truth and trying to uncover what happened to the president. Like I said, there's a lot of hidden truths. There's a lot of lies that come to surface. There's a lot of sort of unraveling of people's plans, and the more kind of sinister side of what's happening in this underground city. There's a lot of sort of hidden truths about essentially what happened on the surface world as well. I call it the surface world, on sort of main Earth essentially. Pretty interesting. It's sort of got a lot of good characters in there. It's got a kind of like quite enjoyable, enjoyable storyline. It keeps you kind of wanting to watch more, keeps you engaged throughout, and I thoroughly enjoyed the whole sort of mystery of who done it, and why do they do it, and again, you also uncover some really sinister characters that are also down there as well, that are working for some people, and I will say the acting on their part is really strong. So that's my recommendation.
So I watched Mobland, which is a 2025 UK crime drama.
I saw
It's
that.
essentially a drama about these two London crime families, and the story is told from the point of view of one of the fixers who works for one of these crime families, and essentially they are rivals. An event happens that kind of puts them at odds with each other and puts them on a trajectory of escalations, leading towards an all-out gang war. And it's basically about this fixer's attempts to manage that and prevent it as where he can. And it just doesn't work and just keeps escalating, and the tensions keep boiling over. It's pretty all right. It's exactly what you would expect a crime drama to be like, but it's pretty solid and pretty competent in what it does.
So I actually watched The Woman in the Yard after the recommendation from Daniel and the team. It was one that I initially was kind of not happy I missed, but just one that I was like, okay, I don't mind not seeing that one. But I'm about halfway through the movie, and I feel like the movie just does so many things really, really well in terms of letting us know what's going on with the family without necessarily having to tell us. There's a lot of things implied by the way that the characters interact with one another, by the way things that they're just doing or things that they're just eating, etc. That just adds a level of understanding to the characters, who they are, what the situation is that they're in, whilst then having this horror element lurking in the background, and you're just sort of trying to navigate this family dynamic whilst there's this perceived threat outside the house. For me, it was great. I was fully immersed. I was fully involved with it, with the characters. The only reason I stopped watching it was because I was kind of like half watching it online, and didn't have time to sort of finish it. But it's one that I'm very much looking forward to how it concludes and how it wraps up its story. But yeah, no, Woman in the Yard. I was very impressed with the opening and how it was building some attention and building the characters that we were following.
And once you've finished it, let us know what you thought about the ending, because there's some controversy surrounding that, and that's kind of the punchline.
Mhm.
And yeah, I'm just curious what your take on that is when you've seen the whole thing.
Finally got around to watching King Richard. It was actually one that was on my list of things to watch for a while, actually, and managed to catch it the other day. Daniel, this is going to be a big turner for you, but it's a biopic of Serena and Venus Williams' father, and his story about yeah, and it's essentially his story about how we kind of like shaped and molded the two young girls to become the tennis stars that we sort of know and recognize, essentially, and it just kind of touches on different aspects of his character, how disciplined and how on top of them he had to be because of the sort of environment that they grew up in, and you know again, if you wanted to, if they wanted to make it, they had to sort of be training, repeating, etc. Talks on the struggles of a young black family trying to make it in a predominantly white sport, which was tennis at the time. Just like a bunch of like kind of like other things as well that it kind of goes into how we try to protect them, and how his fear as a parent kind of hindered them or halted their progress at certain stages and stuff like that. So it goes into some of the complexities of him as a father. Of course, as most true biopics do, it doesn't tell the full story, and there's probably bits in there that we aren't seeing, and maybe how tough he was and how disciplined he was on on the kids. Probably is maybe a little bit watered down in this as well, but it was just cool. And again, growing up seeing Serena's career all throughout, and Venus's career and stuff like that, and then being kind of such popular figures in tennis, it was just kind of good to see and understand, just get a bit of a sense as to their story and their and their story and where they came from, and seeing it through their father's eyes, essentially. So, yeah, that's my recommendation.
So the best thing I watched is Romy and Michelle's high school reunion, which is a 1997 comedy film about these two women who are living in Los Angeles. They're kind of drifting from one party to the next, kind of not without kind of a worry in the world. And then they get the invitation to their 10-year high school reunion and realize they have nothing to show for it. And so they spend a week trying to fix their lives, and that doesn't work. So they decide to go to the reunion pretending to have invented the post it note in order to impress their old high school friends. And that obviously does not go well. And then kind of things escalate from there. And the whole thing is basically like this. It's this very 90s, very colorful, very poppy kind of comedy that is really carried by the performances of these two lead actresses, right, who play Romy and Michelle. And it's like a very kind of pretty standard story about don't let yourself be defined by your material success. Don't let yourself be defined by expectations of other people. And it's kind of using the high school reunion as a vehicle for that idea. But then on top of that, they hang like likable characters and an interesting story, lots of very quotable lines, and it's just all around a good time. And it gets quite weird towards the end, and it's just 90s craziness. and just a lot of fun. The message is something pretty basic, but it takes it to some fun places, and it's an enjoyable movie to watch.
Ambulance. That is a good film, a very good film. I remember I watched it in cinema as well. I actually love that film. I think that's like a hidden gem, underrated. I wouldn't say it's underrated because I think it is rated by the people that watched it, but I'd definitely say it's like a hidden gem. I don't think a lot of people have seen it. Maybe they have, I'm not too sure. But it's starring much two adopted brothers end up doing a money heist, and then it goes completely wrong. But where the selling point, it's pretty much like a mixture of money heist in the beginning, but then it turns into like a whole Fast and Furious type of vibe. But it's all happening inside the ambulance while like so much things are happening, especially while basically a cop is dying in the ambulance, the one that they shot accidentally. So then they're trying to save him because it was supposed to go from a simple mission to now. Even though they were facing a lot, even though they were going to face a lot of time, specifically they could get caught for the heist. Now it's turning even muckier and messier because now they have a cop that they're trying to save while they're running away from the police in the ambulance with a whole car chase madness happening in a freaking ambulance, man. And it's a really, I enjoyed it. It's a fun film. This is like, there's nothing to the storyline. The storyline is pretty, I wouldn't say generic, but it's predictable in a way. However, it's fun. It's very fun. And what's obviously the selling point is obviously the car chases and how they kind of get out of certain situations. And the performances as well, of course. So I'd recommend Ambulance.
Best thing I watched this week was Date Night, which I had seen before, but I rewatched it just on a whim. It's a 2010 comedy action movie about this middle class suburban couple that are basically just trying to get through the day. And when they finally have one of their rare date nights, they end up, through a sequence of events, stealing somebody else's reservation at this very fancy restaurant. And it turns out those people were entangled with the mob. And so those people now think that they are also mob members, and so all sorts of people are after them. And so a hilarious sequence of events unfolds where throughout the night they are trying to find a way out of this because the cops are corrupt and the mobsters don't believe them, that they just gave a wrong name in order to get this table and so on, right? So it's basically just two funny people. It's Tina Fey and Steve Carell, who are some of the funnier people who did comedies in the early 2010s. And they just carry this movie, and it's just a ride. Like, there's not much to this movie other than it's a good time.